Everybody, and thank you for joining me. There's no audio? Now it's working? Okay, so we have the coffee spilled taken care of. We've got the microphone all set up. I want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining me this morning to discuss the future of Portland. Yesterday, as I'm sure you're well aware, I shared a letter with Portlanders expressing my intent after much consideration to not seek a third term as mayor of Portland. That being said, there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to get done over the next year and a quarter. I did not see any scenario where I could successfully move this work forward while at the same time seeking re-election. And just to give you a little bit of a story on that, I ran for re-election 4 years ago. I can tell you that it was nearly a full-time job running for re-election, and I just couldn't see any scenario where I could both run for re-election during what I think will be a fairly busy election cycle while at the same time doing the work that needs to be done to address the crises here in Portland. I want you to know that I love Portland. You all know that I was born and raised here. I've served as mayor since 2017, and the reason that I wanted to be mayor was because I wanted to serve the community and I wanted to help better this community. I want you to know that I'll be laser focused over the remainder of my term to ensure that Portland's set up for a future of success. The city of Portland is moving closer to beginning a new chapter. We heard Portlanders loudly and clearly last fall when they overwhelmingly voted to overhaul our city charter. On January 1st of 2025, these changes will go into effect. And I'm going to work hard to ensure that the transition to the new form of government is successful, while at the same time continuing my administration's bold steps to address the crises in our city. I really believe that this is a critical point facing our city. Today, I want to take some time during this media availability, and at the end, I'll give you plenty of time to ask whatever questions you'd like to ask or make whatever comments you'd like to make. But I want to lay out my vision for the next year plus here in the city of Portland and outline my priorities. First of all, around economic recovery, just speaking broadly, I'm going to continue to drive towards a bold new vision for economic prosperity, focusing on revitalizing our central city and advancing our sports and entertainment districts. Around livability, I agree wholeheartedly with an overwhelming number of Portlanders who say that Portlanders deserve a litter and graffiti-free city, a welcoming place for family as well as friends to be proud of. I will continue to advocate for more dollars to clean our streets, and we'll launch our new program, Portland Solutions, a neighborhood district response program all across the city of Portland. With regard to homelessness, we'll continue to work to get vulnerable Portlanders off the streets and connected both to services and housing opportunities. And it remains my goal to eliminate unsanctioned camping all across the city of Portland. With regard to public safety, Portlanders deserve to feel safe in their neighborhoods and to live their daily lives without fear. I'm going to continue to push for both stronger policies to reduce violence, restrict the use of illicit substances in public spaces, and continue to increase the number of first responders who are available to respond to calls. In short, my work here as mayor is far from being done. I'm doubling down on these efforts, and I remain committed to the city that I love. In addition to these priorities, our government structure is undergoing a massive transformation. This is a transformation unlike any other large city anywhere in America, all the while addressing this unprecedented number of simultaneous crises that are impacting the community. This requires my full attention as mayor. This transition is indeed historic, and it's a massive task, and it really requires three things over the course of the next year. The first is reorganizing the entire management structure of our city bureaus under a city administrator. And it is my intention to move to an interim city administrator as quickly as we can and consolidate the bureaus under that city administrator as quickly as possible. Second, we have to develop a new ranked choice voting system to elect an expanded city council by district. And finally, we have to renovate City Hall to accommodate the new structure. To ensure a successful transition, it's my intent to have this work well underway so that by January 1st, 2025, we can turn over a functional government to the new city council and the new mayor. So we have a lot of work, and we have to start doing that work now. In fact, it's well underway. Taking the future of Portland into account, my administration is focused on bringing economic improvements to the city. The council recently adopted an ambitious and inclusive long-term economic plan called Advance Portland. The central focus of Advance Portland, of course, is economic recovery. This plan will revitalize our central city through a multi-pronged approach, including waiving millions in development fees for office to housing conversions where appropriate, establishing a tax increment financing district to invest millions in funding for community development as well as for housing, expanding our enterprise zone program, and creating other targeted tax incentives that promote investment and vibrancy. Calling upon employers to bring their employees back into the office at least half-time by January 1st, 2024, and amplifying our strengths as a sports and entertainment leader all around the globe. These measures, I believe, will both attract as well as retain family wage jobs, produce more affordable housing, and provide opportunities for wealth creation for all Portlanders. To help aid our city's economic recovery, we also have to get the basics right. We must ensure Portlanders have livable as well as enjoyable community spaces. Those are the things that people love about this community. Indeed, some of the most visible challenges facing our city today are in the area of basic livability. And they can be some of the most challenging to address, such as providing clean public spaces that are free of litter and graffiti. Addressing these challenges requires coordination, not only between our city bureaus, but also our partners and nonprofit, as well as private sector organizations that help us with that work. And so rather than having a fragmented approach, I created the Public Environment Management Office, or PEMO, to coordinate all of these services. PEMO is the result of innovative thinking and decisive action in the form of an emergency declaration that addresses the livability challenges that we all see. This agency exists to deliver solutions like installing lighting where appropriate, picking up litter, and removing graffiti across Portland's public spaces. And the results have been very good. Just since May of 2022, PEMO's work has resulted in over 1 million pounds of litter removed from the streets each month, about $2 million, and this is just over the last year, in spending for street lighting projects around the city, which has been key to decreasing crime and promoting desirable streets, and removing over 245,000 square feet of graffiti citywide since October of 2022. That's the equivalent of about 5 football fields. PEMO also conducts what we call problem solver meetings. This is a neighborhood-specific program where local stakeholders can directly connect with city to solve livability issues, especially those that are related to trash and graffiti, but not exclusively. I can clearly state that in its short life,
PIMO has become one of the most popular new city programs in years. And I'm going to work very hard over the course of the next year to expand the reach of PIMO across the city. In addition, of course, to the establishment of PIMO, we've used very specific place-based strategies, an innovative approach that we call 90-day resets. Over the past year, my administration has sponsored 2 of these reset initiatives to combine our resources across all policy areas to address a specific neighborhood's problems. The first, and this was fairly extensively reported on, it was in Old Town. It was arguably very successful. The second, in the Central East Side Industrial District, has also been successful. It's resulted in 220 trees wrapped in lights to activate public spaces. That was something the community asked for, and it's been delivered. 73,000 square feet of graffiti cleaned, recovery of dozens of stolen vehicles, and over 300 unsanctioned camp removals. While the first 90-day resets were a success, we heard from other Portlanders who said, hey, wait a minute, what about my neighborhood? What can you do for us? Based on this feedback and the success of the 90-day resets, we knew we needed a much broader solution that would be responsive not just to those few targeted neighborhoods, but to the whole city. To make this success a permanent part of our city government, I'm working with Commissioner Ryan, who's the commissioner in charge of civic life, to develop what we're calling Portland Solutions. Portland Solutions will integrate multiple programs under one umbrella, including PIMO, as well as the Street Services Coordination Center, Safe Rest Villages, and the temporary alternative shelter sites. The programs under Portland Solutions have proven themselves to be both agile and effective, and the unification of this work can only amplify that efficacy. Successfully launching and expanding this program will be one of my very top priorities over the course of the next year. Over the past few years, we've obviously seen an increase in Portland's chronic homeless population with often coexisting circumstances, sometimes substance abuse, sometimes behavioral health issues, sometimes all of the above. This population has been especially challenging to assist because they're often very reluctant to go into congregate shelter. The City of Portland launched an outreach team known as the Street Services Coordination Center. Our SSCC outreach teams have made over 2,000 shelter referrals over the past year. Through outreach-based input, our SSCC team let us know that individuals suffering from substance use disorders and other behavioral health challenges would much more prefer a model similar to Safe Rest Villages with outdoor sleeping units versus congregate shelter. As you'll recall, there was a significant opposition to this administration's efforts to launch the larger scale temporary alternative shelter sites. In July, the city officially opened our first task site in Southeast Portland. We went from concept to opening in about 6 months. I'm extremely proud of the work that my team did, not only to overcome initial opposition to this concept, but to in fact prove its success. As of yesterday, there are now 137 individuals staying at the first site. The site includes a comprehensive service model that includes collaboration between nonprofits, healthcare providers, and state housing service providers. This includes both physical as well as behavioral health services, employment services, basic health care, and housing navigation services, as well as on-site care coordination for everyone who comes in to those sites. This is in addition to the 275 rapid rehousing vouchers recently provided by the state that are now designated for use by Safe Rest Villages and our task site. Now, the city has opened a total of 7 Safe Rest Villages in addition to the first task. In total, these programs now provide about 500 shelter beds for chronically unsheltered homeless Portlanders, over 300 of which became available just in the last quarter. We will continue to aggressively pursue additional sites in coming months. This model incentivizes people to leave the street camping from unsanctioned campsites to safer shelter options. It connects them to the services they need to get off and stay off the streets. Our Portlanders have recognized their additive value in the larger shelter system, and they've begun contributing to the cost. Just last week, we received an additional $4.7 million from Multnomah County in capital investments for our next task location. I want to thank the Board of County Commissioners for that important contribution to this effort. I'm also leading a renegotiation of the intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County regarding the Joint Office of Homeless Services. When the public voted for the supportive housing service measure, they expected immediate efforts to address homelessness. The unspent funds, coupled with a lack of clear outcomes and measurable data, is unacceptable both to me and to the City Council at large. This must be addressed in the renegotiation process. I'm going into this conversation with my eyes wide open, and I'll be working with the City Council to review data, audits, and performance metrics before entering into a new agreement. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to successfully reach an agreement with Multnomah County. As we continue to respond to the community's needs, none is greater than the need for Portlanders to feel safe and be safe in their own community. Key community safety indicators have shown that we're on the right path. We have a long way to go, but we're on the right path. Compared to this time last year, overall property offenses, which include theft, arson, burglary, are down more than 13%. This includes a 19% reduction in motor vehicle thefts and a 31% reduction in stolen property. Resolution of gun-related homicides is up 43% compared to the last 3 years at this time. Since the stolen vehicle operations began last year, PPB has recovered 227 stolen vehicles, made 331 arrests, and served 360 warrants, and incidentally seized 49 guns. The city continues to invest heavily in expanding our community safety resources. Since 2022, we've hired 126 sworn officers and continue to prioritize recruitment at the Portland Police Bureau. For the first time in many years, the Police Bureau's hiring has outpaced its attrition. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge PPB's work in the downtown core, which continues to target controlled substances, seizing 150,000 fentanyl pills this year, issuing almost 500 Measure 110 violation tickets, and arresting 45 for drug distribution. Recently, City Council voted to pass an ordinance that restricts public consumption of illicit substances. I'm going to continue to advocate hard over the course of the next year for this change at the state level to ensure that our public spaces are safe for all, not just here in the city of Portland, but in communities all across the state of Oregon. The Portland Police Bureau has done exemplary work by conducting multiple retail theft missions in 2023, increasing officers doing foot patrols, and bringing back the entertainment district detail to Old Town. In addition, the county, city, and DA's office have partnered to form a task force to address retail and auto theft with increased resources to both investigate and then to prosecute these crimes. The gun violence reduction efforts we began last summer continue to thrive. In June, I announced the launch of Portland Ceasefire, a Portland-specific focused deterrence strategy. The development of Portland Ceasefire is well underway with the guidance and the support of the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform. The ceasefire team is focused on identifying those at the highest risk of involvement in gun violence and making individualized contact with them to modify their behavior, either through appropriate services or focused enforcement. While homicide rates are unacceptable at any level, gun-related homicides are now down 17% in 2023 compared to 2022. And the overall shooting rates continue to trend downward compared to last year. Total shooting incidents from January to July of 2023 compared to 2022 are down by 19%. This trend is reflective of the tireless work being done by our community partners, city organizations, including the Office of Violence and Prevention, the Safe Blocks program, and of course, the men and women in the Portland Police Bureau. We're dedicated to a holistic approach to address crime and violence in our community. We must ensure swift accountability while also maintaining a longer-term focus on prevention. I intend to push for these and other public safety measures through the very last hours of my term. It's clear that throughout my administration, the role of the mayor's office has fundamentally changed. The role of the mayor has changed. Now the mayor and city government are called upon to address issues that were beyond the traditional scope of past administrations. Many of the crises we're experiencing today could not have been anticipated even a few years ago. Our city government uses a great amount of resources to address these never-before-seen problems, and it's my goal to ensure that the city continues to do this in an effective and an efficient manner. For the duration of my term, I'm committed to leading with urgency and remain ready to further mobilize the City of Portland's resources to address our highest priorities. Portland is a truly remarkable and resilient community. We've had a tough few years. We all know that. But we've laid a solid foundation, and I firmly believe that Portland's best years are ahead of us. Thank you.
All right, we'll take some questions from the media if you guys have anything for us. And I think, are we going to pass around the mic? Yep. Perfect. All right, just raise your hand. We'll pass it over to you and you can ask us questions. We have policy staff here too, so we can loop them in if your questions are more in the weeds or something like that.
Hello.
Or if I just don't know the answer to the question.
So, Mayor Wheeler, you discussed a lot of ambitious projects. A lot of those would likely extend beyond the next year. So how do you plan to make it an easy transition so that the work can continue when you're not in this role anymore?
Well, the work that I'm doing, I'm not doing independently of the City Council. Ultimately, the City Council decides whether they want to fund these initiatives. And I'm really proud that as a council, you know, we certainly have our disagreements. We should. That's how the democratic process works. But we've stood together on these key initiatives, oftentimes against withering opposition. Remember, the council allocated $29 million to the TASS program before we had a service provider, before we had our first location, before we had anybody signed up on any list to be referred into the sites. The council was there. When it comes to public safety, this council has been unified around our initiatives related to public safety, whether it was the development of the focused intervention team, around livability, the Street Services Coordination Center, the PIMO program. The council's been very supportive, and I am assuming that a number of my colleagues on the council will continue into the next year, beyond 2024. I also know that the public supports these programs. The TASS site now has people actively in the community supporting our efforts because they see it gets people off the streets and helps connect them to services to keep them off the streets. There's strong support in the community around our ceasefire efforts. I believe that's going to continue just by virtue of the strength of the community support we have for that. The public safety initiatives, I don't see that changing anytime soon. The public is holding all of us accountable to public safety standards. So I believe they will stay in place not because they're my programs, but because they are the programs the community needs to see results. They are the solutions that the community is asking for.
You had mentioned kind of the alignment of commissioners. Obviously, there's been some issues such as budget where there is division amongst the different commissioners. How do you plan to create more unity on those topics in the next year?
Yeah, so there's a larger discussion around the transition to the new form of city government. There's, as I said, a number of things we're negotiating. We're negotiating when people would move out of this building so it could be renovated. We're negotiating how quickly we could appoint an interim city manager and have the bureaus report to the interim city manager. I support those things sooner rather than later, by the way. And the third part is the budget. We could begin the unified budget process now. And I started that process by directing that the budgets be done by clusters, areas of interest. And the council plays a huge role in helping us to shape the policies within those areas of interest. I am guessing we'll have some debate around the edges, but my experience over the last 7 years has been that we agree on 95% of the budget and we disagree on 5% of the budget, and that's where the debate comes in. But I would expect the council to ultimately be engaged. I work with them closely, my staffs work closely with the other council offices. There shouldn't be any big surprises by the time we get to the point of actually voting on the budget. Morning.
Good morning. Mayor, you had said when you put the camping ban in place that you'd give it a little bit of time and in the fall get it enforced. Fall starts next week. At what point are you going to enforce the camping ban?
Yeah, I'd like Stephanie to come up and give us the latest and the greatest. Stephanie is my public safety advisor, and she's the one who personally works on this. And Skylar Brockernap, thank you.
But don't you have just a date? I mean, shouldn't there be a date when this will happen?
Well, I think as we've been saying, the city is really focused on trying to do education so that everyone is fully up to speed on where camping prohibitions exist. I know Skylar has been doing a ton of work to get that educational piece out, and she can speak to that. What we're working to do right now is to make sure that we have solid operating procedures, clear direction for police officers and for our outreach teams so that when the enforcement does begin in the coming weeks, I would say, that there's no question, nobody is left wondering how that will work. Sky, do you want to add to that?
Thanks, Stephanie. So I think instead of picking an arbitrary date, we want to make sure all the parties involved are really educated, have had outreach. We're working closely with our partners. I was just delivering some maps to Central City Concern for their outreach team to put in different day centers. We're working with libraries to make sure they have maps and resources and different pieces of the puzzle that are all there for people to access. If they have any questions kind of about how those procedures work, they all have QR codes, obviously, that go right to our website that have resource pages and connection to all the different information that would be helpful kind of for this process. But to Stephanie's point, we want to make sure that police are kind of involved in the standard operating procedures. We want to make sure all the parties involved know exactly how this will be rolled out, and we're going to roll it out pretty slowly in terms of the initial kind of engagement with folks on the street. So in the coming weeks, we will let everybody know as soon as we pick a date, but I want to make sure we actually have confirmation from our partners, whether it be the outreach teams, whether it's the nonprofits that we work with every day, that they have had enough time to really educate folks on the street.
So you don't have a target date?
Not right now. We haven't picked an arbitrary date.
Great. And just a follow-up for the mayor. On the mass camps, you said you backed off on that, and you said there's about 500 people now that are sheltered thanks to the pieces that are in place right now. But when you have 6,000 on the street, are you going to try again to put together some kind of a mass camp like other cities have done?
Yeah, look, when we first proposed this, we had proposed, I think initially several hundred per site in a proposal. And we heard that you could not effectively manage. Some people used 50, a couple of people used 100. We're now well over that threshold at our first site, and things are going just fine. I will absolutely look to scale these. I understand that it's new and it's different for our community to have mass sites like this, but from my perspective, it's not as important how many people you have there as it is how many staff you have per person who is there. We have a ratio of about 1 staff member for every 15. Typically, a shelter is 1 to 100, sometimes even greater than that. And so I believe that this is just me, I believe that this model can be scaled to much larger than where we are today. That's not our problem. Our problem right now is getting the sites. And we have identified numerous sites that we think are appropriate for TAS, but we need people who own these sites to work with us. And that's why it was so important that this first site be clean, safe, effective, well-run, and it is. And I think that will help us to secure additional sites. So you're thinking exactly the way I do, Lisa. This has to be to scale. It's not good enough just to set up a camp and connect a few people to services. There have to be enough of these sites at the scale to be able to address the magnitude of the chronically homeless population we have on our streets. And then there's another important part of this that I think about a lot. Actually, Sky, I think about it, she does it. She does all the hard work here. It's throughput. You have to have connection to behavioral health, substance use disorder treatment, public health services, job training, and navigation to housing, which is reserved for the individuals in these sites. Those are the pieces that are now put together in our first site, but we need to do this citywide in multiple locations. And so, you know, those are the discussions that are underway now. My personal view is we either need about 5 of these sites at 200-ish, or we're going to need fewer that are larger scale than that. That's my personal view based on what I know today. Now, things may change in the future, but that's what I believe today. Sky, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go to Alex.
Thank you. I have a question about Portland Solutions. I know what is in that program right now kind of exists through a lot of emergency ordinances and resolutions. And the programs that they cover really could exist in some of the more traditional bureaus, you know, based on whether it's trash or housing. I'm curious, it seems a little unusual for the mayor's office to be responsible for all of these really like on the ground, hands-on, like the work that Sky's doing, you know, it's not traditional. And so I'm curious why you believe this kind of on the ground work is something that needs to exist within the mayor's office, especially going into the new form of government as well, because I know it's part of that model.
Your question is an excellent one, and it speaks to the problems of a commission form of government in a world where the crises we're facing are multifaceted. In fact, all of the priority areas I mentioned earlier, whether we're talking about public safety, whether we're talking about livability, whether we're talking about drug use, whether we're talking about homelessness, they're all connected. They're all related. And yet our bureaus are vertically siloed under individual commissioners. And so the reason under this form of government that we brought the street services coordination team into our office, the Portland Environmental Management Office into our team, and frankly, other initiatives under our team like the TAS sites, is to overcome the problems that currently exist in a fragmented form of government. As we move to the new form of government, as we move to a city administrator and presumably deputy city administrators, it would be my assumption that we will ultimately transfer the leadership of these programs to the city administrator and the city administrator's staff, because they will be managing not a sleeve of individual bureaus, they will be managing enterprise-wide. And I think that's one of the great positive things about the new form of government. I'm really eager to move towards that interim city manager position ASAP and consolidate the bureaus under that interim city manager ASAP. It will be before the next mayor gets here. And you can imagine this is a little bit thorny because everybody has to let go of something, and everybody is going to take on new responsibilities. But it's the work that I believe needs to be done as soon as possible to successfully transition. By the time people get here who are new city commissioners or a new mayor on January 1st, 2025, I want the city to be up and running, and I want that operation to be turnkey. And these programs, I think, it almost gets back to your question about how do these programs survive. They need to be part of the infrastructure of the city, not just part of a political office. And Sky, did you want to add? Because I'm talking about your life.
We're excited.
Good morning.
Morning, Mayor. I want to ask you about your decision not to run. And in your letter yesterday, you said that being mayor has been both the privilege of a lifetime and humbling. I'd like you to elaborate on that, and particularly the humbling part.
Yeah. To be honest, I have had to reinvent city government in fundamental ways. And we've talked about some of the new initiatives, focused intervention team around gun violence, the work of PMO around livability, the work of the task sites around homelessness, and we could talk about other initiatives as well. And I've led during a very challenging time in our history. We started with unprecedented weather events in 2017, then we went on to clashes between right-wing activists and left-wing activists. Then, of course, we had the Max train stabbing, the death of Commissioner Fish, a global pandemic, wildfires, freeze events, economic calamity as the economy was shut down, an explosion of illicit substances that nobody knew existed 5 years ago, now wreaking havoc on our streets, public safety concerns, and the list goes on and on and on. We have had to adapt and reinvent city government as we go to address these crises. And now on top of it, we are also doing a massive overhaul of city government as asked by our voters. And so there's just a lot going on for me, and knowing how intense a re-election campaign would be, given all of this, I just can't see myself doing it all and doing any of it well. I have to focus on the job at hand. The most important thing I can do right now is not focus on politics, but focus on solutions. And stepping away from a re-election campaign gives me that opportunity to get out of the political realm and into the solution realm. I want to also tell you, I worked through, what if I did run for re-election? If I ran for re-election, every decision I make between now and November of 2024 will be seen through a political lens. That won't work for Portland right now. We don't need politics, we need solutions. And a lot of this is going to require the community to work together. And I think I can be seen as more of an honest mediator, an honest broker, if you will, in this process if I've got nothing at stake politically, because I don't. I'm just focused on solutions.
Just a quick follow-up. I mean, I hear you saying the humbling part maybe is the enormity of the challenges. But you certainly have heard critics say that they feel progress and recovery's been too slow in some key livability and public safety areas. So to those critics who might say, why is it taking you so long to declare that you're on the right path now, but we have a long way to go? What do you say to that?
Well, again, I would say pretty much what I just, well, first of all, I'd empathize, and I would agree. Change is too slow. There are a lot of changes that we have requested. I'm really grateful to the governor for convening a task force on the central city. I've been very open about what our asks are. Many of our asks are asks that have been on the table for years. We have long had a problem around training new police officers that we've recruited at the DPSST. That is a required training program for years. I've been asking for more resources, for more academies, and more training slots. We finally got it. I'm grateful for that. Unfortunately, it just takes time to build new strategies in an environment where we don't have the complete span of control. We don't control, we have police, first responders, fire, we have public space management, managing our parks. We don't have a broader span of control than that. So it really requires me to manage up as much as manage across. It just takes time. I wish we could move more quickly, but unfortunately government doesn't move that quickly. And I feel like, using TAS again as an example, this room was filled to the top with people who came in to vociferously oppose the creation of TAS. Many people compared them to concentration camps, which I found both offensive and historically inaccurate. 6 months later, we opened the doors on that first site. And to do it, we had to bypass traditional government. I had to use executive directive, I had to use our own resources, and I had to manage it out of my office with the support of my colleagues on the City Council, and I want to continue to underscore that. But we had to go through non-traditional challenges, and as you'll require, the only way those sites would work is if they were connecting people to services, that you'd get a case manager and you'd be connected to behavioral health or substance use disorder treatment or health or whatever. We couldn't get other governments that have the tools, the resources, the personnel, and the funding coming to them for those purposes. So Schuyler here had to go out and find service providers to provide those services so we could get the site open now. So we often work against government and sort of the pace of government in order to be more urgent in our response to the crises that we see on the streets. And you've seen us do other things. We want more police officers in the Central City Core, so we increased the overtime payments in order to attract people. I can tell you now, and Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, as a result of that decision, we now don't, what's the right way to say this so I don't get it wrong?
We're much closer to meeting staffing minimums than we have been.
Thank you. So we're getting closer to where we need in terms of the patrol officers to be effective. And the humbling part, just serving in public office right now is humbling. It's not for the faint of heart. People have strong opinions. We're divided as a nation. We're divided oftentimes as a community. And you ask 10 people what's the right way to address the homeless crisis, you'll get 10 different answers. And so it can be humbling just being in these positions, but I want people to know it may look a little messy from the outside, but I'm really grateful that people gave me the trust to do this job, even if it was only for a matter of years. Morning.
Hi there, Mayor. I wanted to ask a follow-up on the Portland Solutions proposal that you're discussing, which you described as a top priority for the next year. And earlier this week, we saw a proposed city org chart under this new form of government. And Portland Solutions, which contains a whole host of city operations and programs, appear to be falling directly under the mayor's purview outside of the city administrator. And I wanted to ask if that fundamentally conflicts with the voter-approved changes to the city charter, which is to put all city operations, such as these programs, under the purview of a city administrator.
So I'll answer the last part, and then I do want Bobby to come up and riff a bit, since he's been my staff lead on this.
And I guess to be more sort of blunt and frank, is this a potential power grab for the mayor going forward?
Yeah, fair question. I believe the answer is no, and that it is completely compliant with both the letter and the intent of the charter reform. You are right that the city administrator runs the day-to-day operations of the city, but under the supervision of the mayor. And so my assumption is they would have to be working very, very closely, because that office is actually operated by the bureaus themselves. So I can't imagine a scenario where the city administrator and the mayor aren't working hand in glove on that. But Bob, you may want to talk about that, because I know it floated around in several different possibilities. And the org chart you saw the other day is a draft. And the council and I, frankly, will take a look at that draft, and I imagine we'll have many changes over the course of the next couple of months. But I'll let Bobby answer that.
And Shane, you and I talked about this. So it's a new program. So it's a startup mode. So we need to get that program up and running. So right now it's under the mayor's org chart, but we believe that under the interpretation of the new charter, as you pointed out, it is an operational function. Therefore, it needs to eventually land with the administrative functions. So it's a temporary measure to get the program up and running, but it will become part of the city administrator's function.
I like his answer much better than mine.
And while I have the mic, we'll just ask you one more question with regard to your decision and the stated reasons for your decision not to seek re-election. It seems to suggest that at this point in time, you don't believe the city of Portland and its government needs to be moving in a fundamentally different direction than the course it is on now. Is that sort of your assessment at this time? And do you see potentially a different mayor of Portland? Would they need to be thinking differently with what the city's needs are and how to address them?
I think I understand your question, and I want to make sure I got it right. When it comes to these crises, homelessness, public safety, livability, and economic recovery, nobody has a monopoly on the truth. Not me, not anybody. And nobody can solve these problems alone, and nobody can lead us out of these problems alone, because by definition, they are multifaceted. They require coordination between governments, plural, that have different spans of control. The private sector, the philanthropic and nonprofit sector, even the faith sector is involved in a number of initiatives with us. So things could most certainly evolve. And I would assume that the campaign of 2024 will include a lot of discussion about, did Mayor Ted get it right in terms of the programs he's establishing, whether it's the TASK, whether it's Commissioner Ryan's Safe Rest Villages, whether it's the efforts around livability, the economic recovery, the work we're doing to activate the downtown core. I would expect lots of people to have lots of different views, but my team and I feel very confident that the path we are on, the programs we have launched, the strategies that we are pursuing, the programs we are funding are the right ones to rise up to meet the challenges of this city today. And we will work to institutionalize those programs so that if the future city government wants to keep and expand and grow those programs, it's turnkey. They won't have to start from scratch like I did. They'll have the programs. But if they decide in 5 years that the Safe Rest Villages or the TASK sites or PMO or whatever are no longer needed, that's their decision. And I can sleep with that. But right now, from my perspective, we're on the right path. This is the right strategy. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, good morning. You talked a lot about needing to have an interim city manager in place. Can you give us an idea of what that timeline looks like? When would that person need to be in place, and when do you start the recruitment process for that? And then secondly, could you ever see yourself being in that role? Is that something you're interested in?
So, oh, good. And I'll let Barry Pack talk about this in a minute, but let me shut the door on that one hard. No, I do not see myself in this role, and I want to be very clear about what the city administrator's role would be. The city administrator is going to be a CEO-level individual who has experience and the capacity to manage a $6.5 billion organization with 7,000 employees and a unionized workforce and many, many different issues. It's not a single product line. It's 1,000 And we're going to have to pay somebody, by the way. And I want to preface that. What we are asking for is a CEO level individual. You're going to need somebody who's committed to public service, because we're not going to be able to pay them the same as you'd get paid in the private sector to manage an organization of this size, this scale, with this complexity. But we're not going to be able to get them on the cheap either. I do not believe that I am best suited to that position. So the answer is no, I would not seek to do that. There's another reason, and maybe I didn't fully answer Shane's question, and I'd like to go one step beneath what I wrote in my letter. My daughter was 3 months old when I was sworn into my first office, which was chair of Multnomah County in 2007. She has lived this path with me every step of the way. As it turns out, she is in the class of 2025, meaning my term will end about 6 months before she goes off to college or whatever her pursuit is. That time is really important to me. And so the main reason is what I stated in my letter. I can't do it all. I cannot run for office while doing the work that needs to be done. But I want you to know that there's another reason there as well that's important to me.
And then can you speak to the timeline of
Barry, why don't you introduce yourself? Give us a heads up on that.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Barry Pack, Senior Advisor on Transition for the Mayor. We don't have a specific time for an interim city administrator. There's a lot still to be worked out. The draft organizational chart that you all saw earlier this week is just that. It's a draft, so we don't even know what an interim city administrator would be managing until that gets finalized and council approves it. And then there's a lot of work to be done with the current council to basically blend two forms of government overlapping at the same time. The mayor has been clear, though, that it's not realistic to expect that come January 1, 2025, we can just flip a switch and have a new form of government ready to stand up and get functioning. We need to have a runway, an on-ramp of time in which we can get some of the kinks worked out so that the new council and mayor can come in and have a functioning, smoothly operating government. We'll have to have a lot of discussion with the current commissioners and the council about what that timeline looks like, and we'll have more information on that in the months to come.
Thanks, Greg. We're running low on time, so that's time for a few more questions.
Thank you. Hi, Mayor. So this is kind of a follow-up to Tim's question. I'm sure you've done a lot of reflecting over the last 7 years. I just want to hear from you if there's anything in your administration that you regret or decisions that you made that you don't feel like benefited all of Portland.
There will be a time when I will have the opportunity to be retrospective in my thinking, and I can tell you, I'm sure there will be things that, with the benefit of hindsight, I will look back on and say, gosh, I wish I'd done this differently. I'd be a fool to stand here and tell you otherwise. But I actually don't spend a lot of time second guessing what I did in the past. My time and energy is focused on the crises today and where we're headed. That is where my full focus and my full attention is. There will be a time for retrospective thinking. For right now, I'll say I'll leave that to history. My focus is on the here and now and where we're headed. That's where my head has to be. Yes? Oh, sorry.
You know, I'm hearing you talk a lot about crises for your priorities, but then I also heard an opportunity, the sports entertainment district. I thought that was really interesting, and I'm curious, why is that a priority among all the crises that we're talking about, and how do you see that playing a role in Portland in the future?
So, this almost dovetails nicely with your question. Thank you for the question. We are facing all of these crises today, but we cannot take our eye off the ball. While we are addressing crisis after crisis, other communities are competing and positioning and investing for future economic growth and prosperity. We have to do that too. We cannot take our eye off the ball of where our competitive advantages are. And there's been a lot of discussion around the green economy, green infrastructure, power sourcing, transportation, and the like. there has been too little attention focused on the power of sports and entertainment as being a great opportunity for the city of Portland. But we can't just sit on our hands and hope it happens. We have a lot of organic arts, culture, music, performance, sports, but you have to invest with intentionality. And I think about, for example, some of the opportunities in the Rose Quarter. We have the current negotiations underway with Rip City on the ground lease for the Moda Center, and we're thinking big and broadly about what does that mean and what does the future look like. You have the Allen Trust being very clear that they intend to sell the Portland Trailblazers. So we're very heavily engaged with the leadership of the Portland Trailblazers and others on those discussions. We have the folks from the Diamond Project who are interested in bringing an MLB team to the city of Portland. There's some potential opportunities for leverage there. And then think about all of the great manufacturers we have here, the marketers we have here, the ancillary businesses that are related to sports and entertainment, the performance venues that we're talking about, a replacement for Keller, which I think is very exciting. Live Nation will be putting a facility here. We've got a lot of local facilities here and a lot of local entertainment organizations that think we can aim higher. And so I see that as a great opportunity. Bobby, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add. Yeah, come up and talk about that. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, Bobby Lee, Chief of Staff. If you look at the landscape of our economy, there's a planning mechanism around what is called location quotient. And what that is an analysis of clusters of similar businesses that are co-located in a similar geographic area. And Portland, unlike other cities, have a higher location quotient numbers around athletic and outdoors, Nike, Adidas, and so forth. So we need to take advantage of that. And that industry is transforming as well significantly because of technology and so forth. With that in mind, geographically also in the Lloyd District area, as the mayor pointed out with Blazers and other facilities there, the bridge project, the ODOT Rose Quarter Bridge project, is foundational to that improvement as well. That will also open up housing opportunities, restaurants, more foot traffic if we can get more activities in that space. So that is the direction that we'd like to head.
Okay, on that note, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all.